Today you will learn about electromagnetic field and radiation and what you can do to protect our most valuable people. So this video is about wireless education, how to reduce and eliminate EMF pollution in the 21st century classroom. So the introduction, what is EMF? We're going to find out, is it safe? What are the best practices for mobile devices, and what can we do to bring awareness? So what is EMF? We're going to watch an introduction to the electromagnetic spectrum.
Something surrounds you, bombards you, some of which you can't see, touch, or even feel. Every day, everywhere you go. It is odorless and tasteless, yet you use it and depend on it every hour of every day. Without it, the world you know could not exist. What is it? Electromagnetic radiation. These waves spread across a spectrum from very short gamma rays to X-rays, ultraviolet rays, visible light waves, even longer infrared waves, microwaves, to radio waves which can measure longer than a mountain range. This spectrum is the foundation of the information age and of our modern world. Your radio, remote control, text message, television, microwave oven, even a doctor's X-ray, all depend on waves within the electromagnetic spectrum. Electromagnetic waves, or EM waves, are similar to ocean waves in that both are energy waves. They transmit energy. EM waves are produced by the vibration of charged particles and have electrical and magnetic properties. But unlike ocean waves that require water, EM waves travel through the vacuum of space at the constant speed of light. EM waves have crests and troughs like ocean waves. The distance between crests is the wavelength. While some EM wavelengths are very long and are measured in meters, many are tiny and are measured in billionths of a meter, nanometers. The number of these crests that pass a given point within 1 second is described as the frequency of the wave. One wave, or cycle, per second is called a hertz. Long EM waves, such as radio waves, have the lowest frequency and carry less energy. Adding energy increases the frequency of the wave and makes the wavelength shorter. Gamma rays are the shortest, highest energy waves in the spectrum. So, as you sit watching TV, not only are there visible light waves from the TV striking your eyes, but also radio waves transmitting from a nearby station, and microwaves carrying cell phone calls and text messages, and waves from your neighbor's Wi-Fi, and GPS units in the cars driving by. There is a chaos of waves from all across the spectrum passing through your room right now. With all these waves around you, how can you possibly watch your TV show? Similar to tuning a radio to a specific radio station, our eyes are tuned to a specific region of the EM spectrum and can detect energy with wavelengths from 400 to 700 nanometers, the visible light region of the spectrum.
Types of electromagnetic field. Okay, there's two different types generally. The native EMF is usually sunlight, and the non-native man-made or artificial EMFs. And they are like 4 categories. Magnetic, electrical, artificial lights such as LED or fluorescent. And we are going to pay particular attention to microwave radiation in this presentation. Here you have the electromagnetic spectrum, ionizing and non-ionizing wavelength frequency. We're going to pay particular attention to microwaves, which are like microwave ovens, cell, Wi-Fi, satellite, baby monitors, cordless phones, wireless smart meters, cell phones and cell towers are all in this microwave frequency. And you notice that the sunlight is in the visible infrared and ultraviolet spectrum. Ionizing is more of like a spectrum where you have atoms that are broken apart, or chemical bonds that break apart, whereas the non-ionizing is the part where the spectrum, it does not break apart, and it's non-ionizing red, an area which is non-thermal part that we will take a look at more. So what is EMF? So life is electromagnetic. We're all electromagnetic, humans, animals, and plants. We evolved in an electromagnetic field, but the field is now 10 to the power of 11 to 10 to the power of 18 times more microwave radiation than throughout history. Now, safety guides are absolute because they are based solely on thermal heating effects of 1998 study. They do not protect against non-thermal effect. The non-thermal extremely low frequency, the ELF, or the radio frequency, can induce quite a lot of damage at low level. So here you have a typical human exposure over time of nature or man-made radio frequency. You can see that the natural background was pretty good, typical of 1950s, and then higher radiation in 2010. So it looks like the increased exposure has more power density with this graph here. Here you have a typical child radio frequency exposure. So the regular microwave EMF exposure has increased over the duration from 1935 to 2010. Matter of fact, it has exponentially increased. EMF and wireless education. So technology is essential, but it also has its purposes. This is about safe use of technology. We all use technology. It's just part of life. It is changing so drastically, but science is not evolving as fast. Here you have proof that it takes a while for science to catch up. For instance, DDT is not good for me, and we know that DDT is not healthy, and cigarettes as well, and asbestos is the same situation. Is the effect of EMF all in your head? There's lots of symptoms, and some people don't even know about it. And here are some of the symptoms, like nausea, insomnia, not able to go to sleep or fall asleep or stay asleep, impaired learning ability, hormonal disruption, cardiological compromise, DNA damage, diabetes, neurological disruptions, reproductive problems, even group 2 possible human carcinogen. So here is the World Health Organization, where they're looking at research on cancer, and they show that it has possible carcinogenic effects to human, and it is a group class 2B. So is it safe? There was no pre-market testing for EMFs. They did not research radio frequency to ensure any harm. No scientist with EMF expertise has systematically reviewed or reported on the science to ensure safety, and the effects found at very low levels. So let's look at the NBC National News video to show you more safety and side effects of that.
So a growing number of prominent doctors and scientists are raising warning flags over radiation this morning, and your kids could be facing a greater risk of exposure. NBC National correspondent Miguel Almaguer was granted rare access inside a cell phone test lab.
You see them every day, everywhere. Kids on phones. adults. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, children are now exposed to an exponentially greater amount of radio frequency than any adult will ever be in a lifetime. Part of the problem, this isn't your mother's flip phone. Smartphones today have multiple antennas located inside the phone. When you talk, text, stream music, or videos, they emit non-iodizing radiation, similar to a low-powered microwave oven.
And it's the irregular, pulsed nature of the signal over thousands of minutes, over many years, that we believe can cause a great problem for children and for the rest of us as well.
Cell phone providers say they follow all safety guidelines put into place by the FCC. Those cell phone companies then work with labs like this one to test your device.
The current FCC safety standard was developed nearly 20 years ago. The test at Sedicom in Milpitas, California, starts by taping a phone to the ear of a plastic head. The size of a 200-pound man, it's filled with liquid.
The fluids used in these tests best replicate the same properties inside the human head. Scientists are then able to determine how much radiation penetrates the head when you're talking on the phone.
The robotic arm precisely moves to various hotspots on the head to test the specific absorption rate. The phone we tested was within the FCC allowed radiation limit, but critics say these standards are outdated and urge the federal agency to adopt stricter radiation guidelines. Current FCC standards do not account for the unique vulnerability and use patterns specific to pregnant women and children, warns the American Academy of Pediatrics in a letter to the FCC.
Children are not little adults. The skull is thinner. Also, the volume of the brain is less compared to 200-plus size man.
The U.S. Government Accountability Office also asked the FCC to reassess the exposure limit, in particular the radiation limit when you have your cell phone close to your body, like in your pocket or when you hold it directly next to your head, or as some teens do, sleep with it on their pillow.
Phones are transmitting radiation so long as they're connected to the internet and connected to the Wi-Fi. And even if you're not talking on your phone is talking to the tower.
Critics of the FCC's current guidelines give this simple advice to all consumers. Use the speakerphone or an earpiece, and remember, distance is your friend. Keeping a phone even a few inches off your body reduces exposure several thousand times. For today, Miguel Almaguer, NBC News, Milpitas, California.
Health agencies from other countries, including Canada, Israel, and France, recommend limiting a child's exposure to cell phone radiation. The FCC tells NBC News, quote, "The U.S. has among the most conservative standards in the world. As part of our routine review of these standards, we're soliciting input from multiple stakeholder experts, including federal health agencies and others, to guide our assessment." Makes you think twice as a parent, though.
Absolutely.
Especially one whose kids are on the cell phone a lot.
Yeah, when you think about that, they're particularly vulnerable. This is all such new technology. I think we have yet to really see the effects.
Here I have an excerpt from Frank Clegg on 5G and tech and safety.
Hello, my name is Frank Clegg, and I've spent over 40 years in the technology sector. My most recent position is a president of Microsoft Canada. In my career, I've seen the tremendous benefit that technology can provide. I've also seen the potential harm if technology is not implemented correctly. And I believe our current implementation of wireless technology is not safe. That's why I co-founded Canadians for Safe Technology and why I joined the business advisory group of the Environmental Health Trust. I am especially concerned about our current implementation of 5G wireless technology. And the more research I do and the more experts I talk to, the more concerned I become. Now, there's no doubt that there are benefits such as autonomous vehicle and faster download speeds. At the same time, I think there is potential harm. I think it's important that we understand that 5G is not just an incremental number on our cell phones. In fact, over 230 scientists and researchers from 41 countries around the world have formally written to the United Nations, their member nations, and the World Health Organization, expressing their concern over the planned rollout of 5G technology, especially for vulnerable populations such as children, pregnant women, and the environmentally sensitive. They have been joined by state legislatures and federal regulators who have asked the FCC to provide evidence that there is no harm from the rollout of 5G technology. There's no doubt that the engineers and businesses and companies that roll out technology are well-meaning. However, their focus is on being first to market and getting new products into the market as efficiently and quickly as they can. I am not aware of any research or studies by my industry or related industry that deal at all with the health or safety effects of wireless technology. Here are some important facts about 5G. 5G technology has not been tested. I am not aware of a single study that shows that 5G technology is safe. 5G, as in all other wireless technology, gives off radio frequency radiation, which is absorbed in the human body and accumulates in the human body. One segment of 5G technology are millimeter waves. Millimeter waves are used by the US and Israeli government in their active denial systems, which are used for crowd control. And what they do is they provide a very painful reaction in the skin organs of the body. We have no idea what the impacts will be to human health if that kind of millimeter wave technology is used and we are exposed to it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are significant proven health effects from wireless technology and wireless devices. These include insomnia, headaches, fatigue, heart palpitations, all caused by exposure to wireless devices and the radiation from them. More serious symptoms and conditions include heart arrhythmia, infertility, tinnitus, numbness or tingling in the extremities, diabetes, cancer, and permanent DNA damage. Mental health is also impacted, with increased anxiety, depression, rises in ADHD and autism, mood swings, and emotional instability. In fact, all of these health factors and conditions have risen exponentially over the last 30 years, and hundreds of studies that show proof of biological harm from wireless devices. Most recently, in 2018, the National Institute of Health's National Toxicology Program released the findings of a 14-year, $25 million study that showed clear evidence of harm in terms of cancer and permanent DNA damage. This study, several months later, was verified by the prestigious Ramazzini Institute out of Italy, which found the same results. Now you may ask how a product that has this potential harm could ever be released to the market and to the public for public use. Well, the way the process works is the FCC regulates all wireless devices and products associated with them. Unfortunately, the FCC is made up of previous telecom executives, lawyers, and engineers. It does not have any scientists or doctors that you would expect to be involved with the regulation of potentially harmful products. In fact, the FCC guidelines are 20 years out of date without any major significant improvement. Countries such as China, Russia, Italy, and Switzerland have safety guidelines that are 100 times safer for their citizens. The FCC guidelines are based on small, short-term, infrequent exposure. They do not worry about the accumulated effects for multiple devices.
We further have research on rats and the effects of EMF on fetus.
Fetus is perhaps the most vulnerable to these types of insults. When the brain is just forming, we are perhaps at our most vulnerable stage. So this is a study that really looked at only the effect of prenatal exposure to cell phone radiation. What effect does having a cell phone near your baby when you're pregnant have on that baby later on in life when that baby's grown up? We tested these mice when they reached adulthood and looked at the lasting effect of that early prenatal cell phone exposure. The mice who were exposed to cell phones were more hyperactive. They were running around the cage a lot more aggressively. They had poorer memory. They couldn't remember objects in the cage as well as their counterparts who weren't exposed to the cell phone radiation. But they did not have any increased anxiety, as sometimes running around can be a sign of anxiety. It was not that. They were calm and relaxed. So they were running around these cages, bouncing off the walls, not a care in the world. Something that in our eyes resembles attention deficit hyperactivity disorder in children. That was the closest model we can think of to the behavioral effects that we saw in the mice.
When I first saw Hugh Taylor's study, I was thrilled and really deeply concerned, because I was aware of research earlier looking at what happens inside the brain. And if you look at something called the dentate gyrus, which occurs here and is quite critical to where brain cells form for thinking and learning, you can see that prenatally exposed rats develop smaller brains with more brain damage.
The brain is tremendously resilient, but when there's so many environmental insults at once, the circuitry in the brain becomes overwhelmed. And unlike what we have in our electrical wiring in homes, where there's a circuit breaker that can stop the electrical flow before it causes damage, the brain doesn't have that same capacity. And so environmental insults, when they add up, the circuitry is especially vulnerable.
We have some human evidence now where a few studies have followed women with exposures to electromagnetic fields, and they have seen that their children who were exposed to more electromagnetic radiation tend to have more learning disabilities and more problems in school.
Mothers who spent a lot of time on the cell phone, carried a cell phone with them during their pregnancies, had a higher risk of having children with behavioral problems. And I think when you have clear cause and effect relationship in mice, and an association in women, that women who use these cell phones had children with more behavioral problems, I think that's together very powerful evidence saying that this is truly a cause and effect in humans as well. The mouse studies prove that it's really causative, that the cell phones are causing it. It's not just because of some other behaviors linked to cell phones in women.
So you can see there's a positive correlation or cause and effect with the autism spectrum disorder and the typical child RF exposure. And it is like exponential curve here. So research shows that 67% of non-industrial funded studies demonstrates that it has a biological disruption. That means it has effect, EMF has effect on our body, both biological and chronological effects as well. So this is a Wi-Fi exposure from tablet. You're looking at the heat map from a supercomputer. The white part is the high intensity, and we see that there is like a DNA breakage from EMF exposure right in the nose area. It looks like the exposure has penetrated into the face that it's exposed to most. Okay, so this is Wi-Fi exposure from the laptop. So you can see that the antenna there is right on the knee, and the exposure is much more intense in that area. The absorption of the exposure is more intensified in that area, where even the chest and leg area is also exposed. The Wi-Fi exposure from laptop, you're looking at the mobile mast 100 meters, and the fluctuation is not as intense, whereas Wi-Fi enabled laptop at 50 centimeters and accessing files, and you see that the signal strength is quite substantial, and there's lots of frequency megahertz as well involved. Factors of exposure: power intensity. The more power it has, the greater of exposure and harm and damage. Cumulative exposure, the more time or accumulation effect, longer duration, it will, that's one of the factors as well. Frequency, how often the signal, like intermittent, like off and on, or continuous, that will affect the exposure rate. The pulse modulation is a very important factor because if you have irregular pulsing, the body can't handle it and therefore just acquires more exposure, more damage to the DNA cells. Polarity, information content, the more like video streaming is worse than files downloads. Reflection, absorption, interference, and hotspots also are factors of exposure. And finally, vulnerability, especially the young or the new mothers, and as well as people who have electrical hypersensitivity to frequency, low emissions frequency rates as well. Children are more vulnerable because their skulls are thinner, the brains contain a higher water content, it has very aqueous content in their brain matter, so it's easy to penetrate and absorb that intensity faster than adult brain. Their heads are smaller, the nervous system is still developing, and their immunity is still developing as well. 5-year-olds absorb almost 60% more microwave radiation than adult, and exposure in bone marrow up to 10 times greater than adults. What are the best practices for mobile devices? So obviously, turn off the devices when not in use, turn Wi-Fi on only when needed, and use airplane mode where possible, especially when you are in a car. Always place mobile device on a solid surface and not near your body. And hardwired devices with cable or fiber optics, and they're much more faster as well. And use corded phones, not cell phones or smartphones. Okay, also minimize extremely low frequency through shielding and grounding. And also the viewing distance should be a minimum of 12 centimeters from the screen. Opt out of wireless smart meters in smart homes. Finally, wear computer glasses or blue light blocking glasses when you're exposed to blue light, especially when you're on your devices. So here is some of the tips. For instance, the Castle Hill High School in Australia, this is their parent council committee. They put together mobile phone safety tips and cyberbullying information for everyone there. They also have the Jersey Educational Association have recommended lots of things to reduce radiation exposure. And this is the 2019 report on toxic effects on blue light. They say that it leads to failing eyesight and affects the sleep and circadian rhythm of the students or anybody who are exposed to this blue light. Use your cell phone wisely. Use speakerphones, headsets, airplane mode when on your body. This is the microwave cell phone effect, absorption in the brain according to age. You see that 5-year-olds, the penetration is way deeper and more intense than the 10 or the adult. So obviously there's a long-term exposure in children, and it's just the accumulation. What can you do to bring awareness? So every child has a right to a healthy environment. No child should be forcibly exposed to a known toxin in their classroom or in their home or anywhere else. Precaution is overdue. Protection is now an emergency. So let's protect the ones we love. Let us focus on mitigating the negative effects of EMF exposure and not treat the symptoms in our children. So let's listen to a message from a 13-year-old speaking on cell phone and Wi-Fi radiation.
And I am honored to be speaking with you today. At age 13, I am fortunate to have the opportunity to voice my concerns about wireless radiation and speak up for my generation. Every day, my friends carry their phones, tablets, and other wireless devices on their bodies, with complete trust that everything is safe. But I decided to do some further research, and I was surprised to find that no one has ever claimed that the levels of wireless radiation we are exposed to daily are safe. This led me to ask some questions. Are the devices we use every day harming our health? What facts are already known and what still needs to be discovered? Who is conducting the needed research? Most importantly, why is no one telling young people that we could be at risk for serious health and reproductive problems? I'm here today to say my generation has a right to know. We must know the truth about the risks we are facing with cell towers, routers, and multiple devices around us all day and night. So today, I am calling on the FCC, the wireless industry, and the science and medical communities to share the truth, to join with us and recommend caution. I am asking for more extensive, unbiased research. I am asking our guardians to teach kids how to use tech with reasonable precautions to minimize exposure. Our future depends on adults doing the right thing now. Not tomorrow, not in 10 years, but now. The words of Bill Moyers convey the urgency I feel regarding children's health and wireless technology. We seem to prefer a comfortable lie to the uncomfortable truth. We punish those who point out reality and reward those who provide us with the comfort of illusion.
And finally, these are the resources and the references that I have here. Thanks very much for listening to this presentation, and hopefully you will understand a little bit more about electromagnetic fields and radiation and what you can do to protect the most vulnerable people in your classroom.